Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Davis glanced up from his computer screen, his eyes darting to the time displayed in the corner. A sigh escaped his lips as he realized another workday was drawing to a close. The once lengthy commute between his workplace and home had dwindled to a mere 15-minute walk, a change that brought mixed emotions. As he powered down his computer and gathered his belongings, Davis couldn't help but reminisce about the days when the journey home felt like an adventure. Back then, the distance had been a buffer, a chance to decompress and shed the day's stress before stepping into the complicated world that awaited him at home. Slinging his messenger bag over his shoulder, Davis made his way out of the office building. The evening air held a hint of autumn crispness, and he took a deep breath, savoring the moment of freedom. His feet carried him along the familiar path, each step bringing him closer to the life he both dreaded and accepted. A vibration in his pocket drew his attention. Fishing out his phone, Davis saw a message from his friend, Michael.
"Hey man, wanna grab a beer? I'm at O'Malley's."
Davis's thumb hovered over the screen, temptation warring with obligation. The thought of a cold beer and easy conversation with a friend who knew him, the real him, was enticing. But the image of his mother waiting at home, her expectations weighing heavily on his conscience, made him hesitate. He typed out a quick response. "Can't tonight. Maybe next time." Pocketing his phone, Davis continued his journey, his steps growing heavier as he approached the modest house he called home. The porch light was on, a beacon of welcome that filled him with a conflicting mix of comfort and dread. Taking a deep breath, Davis steeled himself for what lay ahead. He inserted his key into the lock, the familiar click signaling the start of his nightly transformation. "Monroe, is that you, sweetie?" His mother's voice drifted from the kitchen, filled with hope and expectation. Davis closed his eyes, pushing down the familiar ache in his chest. "Yes, Mom, I'm home," he called out, his voice slightly higher than his natural tone. "Oh, wonderful! I've made your favorite casserole. Why don't you go freshen up and we'll have dinner together?" "Sounds great, Mom. I'll be down in a bit." Davis made his way upstairs, each step feeling like a betrayal of his true self. He entered his bedroom, or rather Monroe's bedroom, and closed the door behind him. The room was a shrine to femininity, with floral wallpaper, lace curtains, and a vanity crowded with makeup and hair accessories. He moved to the closet, filled with dresses, skirts, and blouses in pastel shades. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for a powder blue dress, the fabric soft against his skin. Davis stripped off his work clothes, carefully folding them and hiding them in a drawer. As he slipped on the dress, Davis caught his reflection in the full-length mirror. The masculine lines of his body seemed at odds with the delicate garment, a visual representation of the discord within him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next step in his transformation. Davis sat at the vanity, his movements practiced and efficient. He applied foundation, concealing the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw. Mascara lengthened his lashes, and a swipe of pink lipstick completed the illusion. Finally, he reached for the blonde wig, carefully positioning it on his head. The face that stared back at him from the mirror was no longer Davis. It was Monroe, his twin sister, forever frozen in time at the age of her passing. The resemblance was uncanny, a cruel trick of genetics that now served as both a blessing and a curse. Davis, now Monroe, stood, smoothing down the dress and adjusting the wig one last time. He slipped on a pair of delicate flats and a necklace that had once belonged to his sister. The final touch was a spritz of floral perfume, the scent wrapping around him like a comforting lie. Taking a deep breath, Monroe descended the stairs, each step carrying him further from his true self and deeper into the charade that had become his life. His mother waited at the bottom of the stairs, her face lighting up with joy at the sight of her daughter. She was a woman in her early 60s, with graying blonde hair and the same blue eyes that Monroe now displayed. "Oh, sweetheart, you look lovely," she gushed, pulling Monroe into a tight embrace. "That dress always did bring out your eyes." Monroe returned the hug, ignoring the discomfort of the unfamiliar curves pressing against him. "Thanks, Mom. The casserole smells delicious." They made their way to the dining room, where 2 place settings awaited them. Monroe took his seat, carefully arranging the skirt of his dress as he sat down. His mother bustled about, serving the food with a cheerful energy that seemed at odds with the underlying tension in the room. "So, how was work today?" she asked, settling into her chair across from Monroe. Monroe launched into a carefully crafted story about his day, weaving truth and fiction into a tapestry that would satisfy his mother's expectations. He spoke of friendly coworkers, challenging projects, and office gossip, all from the perspective of a young woman navigating the professional world. As they ate, Monroe found himself slipping deeper into the role. His gestures became more feminine, his laugh a little higher, his mannerisms a perfect mirror of the sister he had lost. It was a performance honed by years of practice, a dance on the razor's edge between love and self-preservation.
"Oh, before I forget,"
his mother said, reaching for something beside her chair. "I picked up a new blouse for you today. I thought it would look perfect with that skirt you love." She handed Monroe a gift bag, her eyes shining with anticipation. Monroe accepted it with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, pulling out a delicate silk blouse in a soft pink shade. "It's beautiful, Mom. Thank you," he said, running his fingers over the fabric. The gesture of love behind the gift was genuine, but it felt like another link in the chain that bound him to this false identity. As they finished their meal, Monroe helped clear the table, falling into the routine that had become second nature. They settled in the living room, his mother chattering about neighborhood gossip and plans for the weekend. Monroe nodded and smiled at all the right moments, but his mind wandered. He thought of Michael, probably still at O'Malley's, surrounded by friends who knew him as Davis. He imagined the easy laughter, the clinking of beer bottles, the freedom to be himself without fear or pretense. "Monroe, honey, are you listening?" His mother's voice snapped him back to the present. "Sorry, Mom. I guess I'm just a little tired from work." She reached out, patting his hand affectionately. "Of course, dear. Why don't you head up to bed? We can talk more in the morning." Monroe nodded, grateful for the reprieve. He stood, smoothing down his dress once more.
"Good night, Mom. Love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Sleep tight."
As Monroe climbed the stairs, he felt the weight of the day settling on his shoulders. In the sanctuary of his bedroom, he carefully removed the trappings of his sister's identity. The wig came off first, followed by the makeup and jewelry. He changed out of the dress, hanging it neatly in the closet before slipping into a pair of comfortable sweatpants and a t-shirt. Davis, for he was Davis once more, sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands through his short hair. The silence of the room was both a comfort and a torment, allowing him to be himself, but also forcing him to confront the reality of his situation. He reached for his phone, scrolling through missed messages and notifications. A text from Michael caught his eye. "Missed you tonight, man. Let me know if you want to hang out this weekend." Davis typed out a response, his fingers hesitating over the send button.
"Thanks. I'll try to make it next time."
He hit send, knowing that next time might never come. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Davis grappled with the conflicting emotions that had become his constant companions. Love for his mother warred with resentment for the role she forced him to play. Guilt over perpetuating the lie clashed with the fear of what would happen if he ever revealed the truth. He thought of his sister, the real Monroe, wondering what she would think of this elaborate charade. Would she understand the sacrifice he was making for their mother's sake? Or would she be horrified at the way her memory was being used? Sleep eluded him as he tossed and turned, his mind a whirlwind of what-ifs and might-have-beens. In the quiet darkness of his room, Davis allowed himself to dream of a different life, one where he could be true to himself without fear of shattering his mother's fragile reality. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, Davis finally drifted off into a fitful sleep. In a few short hours, he would wake and begin the cycle anew. Davis in the world, Monroe at home, forever caught between two identities. The next morning arrived all too soon, the harsh buzz of his alarm jolting Davis from his restless slumber. He blinked groggily, the weight of another day settling on him before he'd even left the bed. With a heavy sigh, he swung his legs over the side and pushed himself up, shuffling towards the bathroom. The face that greeted him in the mirror was his own, Davis, not Monroe. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his lack of restful sleep, and the beginnings of stubble shadowed his jaw. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to wash away the lingering remnants of last night's performance. As he went through his morning routine, Davis could hear his mother moving about downstairs. The sounds of pots clanging and the rich aroma of coffee wafting up the stairs created a deceptive sense of normalcy. It was almost possible to pretend that this was just an ordinary household, a mother preparing breakfast for her son. But Davis knew better. He knew that when he descended those stairs, his mother would be expecting to see Monroe, not him. The thought made his stomach churn, but he pushed the feeling aside. This was the reality he had accepted, the price he paid for his mother's happiness and stability. Dressed in his work clothes, a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, Davis took a deep breath before opening his bedroom door. He paused at the top of the stairs, his hand resting on the banister as he gathered his courage. "Good morning, sweetheart," his mother's cheerful voice called up to him.
"I've made your favorite blueberry pancakes."
Davis closed his eyes, centering himself. When he opened them again, he was Monroe, at least in voice and mannerism. "Thanks, Mom. I'll be right down." He descended the stairs, his movements careful and deliberate, mimicking the grace his sister had possessed. His mother beamed at him from the kitchen doorway, a spatula in hand and a frilly apron tied around her waist. "There's my girl," she said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" Davis nodded, forcing a smile.
"Like a baby,"
he lied, taking his seat at the kitchen table. A plate of steaming pancakes was placed before him, the sight and smell momentarily distracting him from the discomfort of his situation. As they ate, his mother chattered about her plans for the day, a book club meeting, some grocery shopping, maybe a bit of gardening if the weather held. Davis listened attentively, offering appropriate responses and asking questions when expected. "Oh, and don't forget," his mother said as she refilled his coffee cup, "we have dinner with the Hendersons tonight. Carol's been asking about you." Davis felt a jolt of panic. The Hendersons were old family friends, people who had known Monroe. Dinner with them meant extending his performance beyond the confines of the house, maintaining the illusion in front of others who might be more likely to see through it. "Tonight?" he asked, trying to keep the alarm out of his voice. I'm not sure I can make it, Mom. I might have to work late." His mother's face fell, disappointment evident in her eyes. "But Monroe, you promised. Carol's daughter is in town and she's so looking forward to catching up with you. You two were such good friends in high school." The guilt hit Davis like a physical blow. He remembered Amy Henderson. She had indeed been Monroe's best friend. The thought of facing her, pretending to be the girl she had grown up with, made him feel sick. I'll try my best to be there," he found himself saying, unable to bear the look of sadness on his mother's face.
"Maybe I can leave work early."
His mother's expression brightened immediately. "Wonderful. I'll let Carol know. Oh, and wear that new blouse I got you. It'll be perfect for the occasion." Davis nodded mutely, his appetite suddenly gone. He pushed the remaining pancakes around his plate, his mind racing with the implications of the evening ahead. As he prepared to leave for work, his mother fussed over him, straightening his collar and smoothing imaginary wrinkles from his shirt. "Have a great day, sweetie," she said, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "I'll see you this evening." Davis managed a smile and a wave as he headed out the door, the weight of the impending dinner hanging over him like a storm cloud. The short walk to his office, once a respite, now felt like a countdown to an inevitable disaster. Throughout the workday, Davis found it hard to concentrate. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but he waved off their concerns with vague excuses about not sleeping well. In truth, his mind was consumed with the upcoming dinner, running through scenarios and trying to prepare for every possible question or situation that might arise. As the end of the workday approached, Davis found himself staring at his computer screen, his finger hovering over the mouse. He could send an email right now, make up an excuse about a last-minute project, avoid the dinner altogether. But the thought of his mother's disappointment, the sadness that would cloud her eyes, stayed his hand. With a resigned sigh, he began to pack up his things. He had made a promise, and he would keep it, no matter the personal cost. The walk home seemed shorter than ever, each step bringing him closer to a performance that would test the limits of his acting abilities. As he approached the house, he could see his mother through the front window, bustling about in preparation for the evening. Davis paused on the sidewalk, taking a moment to steel himself for what lay ahead. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, he was Monroe, ready to face whatever challenges the evening might bring. As he entered the house, his mother greeted him with a flurry of excitement. "Oh, good, you're home! Hurry and get changed! The Hendersons will be here in an hour!" Davis nodded, making his way upstairs to begin his transformation. The routine was familiar by now. The careful application of makeup, the positioning of the wig, the donning of feminine clothing. But tonight, every step felt more significant, more fraught with potential disaster. He chose the new blouse his mother had given him, pairing it with a modest skirt and low heels. As he studied his reflection in the mirror, Davis couldn't help but wonder what Amy Henderson would see when she looked at him. Would she recognize the friend she had once known? Or would she sense the imposter behind the carefully constructed facade? The sound of the doorbell jolted him from his reverie. Voices drifted up from downstairs. The Hendersons had arrived. With one final steadying breath, Davis, now fully transformed into Monroe, made his way downstairs to face the evening ahead. The living room was alive with conversation and laughter as Monroe descended the stairs. All eyes turned to him, and he felt a moment of panic, certain that they would see through his disguise. But their faces showed only warmth and recognition. "Monroe, darling!" Carol Henderson exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace him. "It's been far too long! You look absolutely lovely!" Monroe returned the hug, his voice pitched higher as he responded, "It's wonderful to see you too, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you for coming." As they pulled apart, Monroe's gaze fell on Amy. She stood slightly apart from the group, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of her old friend. There was a moment of hesitation before she stepped forward, a smile spreading across her face. "Mon," she said softly, using the nickname that only she had ever used for Monroe. "God, it's like looking at a ghost." The word sent a chill down Monroe's spine, but he forced a laugh. "Come on, Am. Don't tell me I look that bad." Amy shook her head, pulling Monroe into a tight hug. "No, you look exactly the same. It's amazing." As the evening progressed, Monroe found himself navigating a minefield of memories and shared experiences. Amy regaled the group with stories of their high school adventures, each tale a potential trap that could expose Monroe's deception. "Remember that time we snuck out to go to that concert?" Amy said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Your mom was so mad when she found out." Monroe's mother chuckled. "Oh, I remember. You girls were grounded for a month." Monroe nodded, desperately searching his memory for any details his sister might have shared about that night. "Yeah, but it was worth it. The music was amazing." Amy raised an eyebrow. "Amazing? You spent half the night complaining about how loud it was and how your ears would never stop ringing." Monroe felt a flash of panic, but covered it with a laugh. "Well, maybe time has made me nostalgic.
It seems better in hindsight. As dinner was served, the conversation turned to more current topics. Monroe spoke vaguely about work, careful not to give too many specifics that might contradict anything his mother believed about her daughter's life. Throughout the meal, Monroe could feel Amy's eyes on him, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. There were moments when her brow would furrow slightly, as if something wasn't quite adding up. After dessert, as the adults settled in the living room with coffee, Amy suggested she and Monroe take a walk for old times' sake. Monroe agreed, partly out of a desire to maintain the illusion and partly out of a desperate need for fresh air. As they strolled down the quiet street, Monroe could sense the questions brewing in Amy's mind. Finally, she broke the silence. "Mon, what's going on?" she asked, her voice low and serious. Monroe's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Amy stopped walking, turning to face him fully. You're different. I can't put my finger on it, but something's not right. It's like you're playing a part." For a moment, Monroe considered telling her everything. The words were on the tip of his tongue, the truth about who he really was, about the daily charade he performed for his mother's sake, but the potential consequences of such a revelation loomed large in his mind. Instead, he forced a smile. It's been years. People change. I've grown up, that's all." Amy studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. "I guess you're right. It's just, I miss my best friend, you know?" The guilt hit Monroe like a physical blow. "I miss you too," he said softly, and in that moment it wasn't entirely a lie. He did miss the easy friendship his sister had shared with Amy, the bond that he could never truly replicate. As they made their way back to the house, Monroe's mind raced. How long could he keep up this charade? How many more close calls could he navigate before someone saw through the carefully constructed illusion? The evening finally drew to a close, with promises to stay in touch and plans for future get-togethers that Monroe knew he would have to find ways to avoid. As the door closed behind the Hendersons, Monroe felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. His mother turned to him, her face glowing with happiness. "Wasn't that lovely? It's so nice to see you reconnecting with the old friends." Monroe nodded, summoning the last of his energy to maintain the facade. "It was great, Mom. I'm pretty tired, though. I think I'll head up to bed." As he climbed the stairs, Monroe could feel the weight of the evening pressing down on him. In the safety of his room, he carefully removed the trappings of his sister's identity, becoming Davis once more. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, Davis grappled with the events of the night. The near discovery by Amy, the web of lies that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day, the toll it was taking on his own sense of self. It all swirled in his mind, keeping sleep at bay. He thought about the life he was missing out on, the friendships he couldn't maintain, the relationships he couldn't pursue, the simple joy of being true to himself. But then he remembered the look of contentment on his mother's face, the peace that this illusion brought her, and he knew he would continue this charade for as long as necessary. As dawn began to break, Davis finally drifted into a restless sleep, his dreams a confusing mix of identities and expectations. In a few short hours, he would wake and begin the cycle anew. Davis in the world, Monroe at home, forever caught between two realities, sacrificing his own happiness for the sake of his mother's fragile peace. The next morning, Davis awoke to the sound of his mother's voice calling up the stairs. "Monroe, honey? Don't forget, we have brunch with Aunt Evelyn today." The reminder hit Davis like a bucket of cold water. Aunt Evelyn, his mother's sister and one of the sharpest, most observant people he knew. If anyone was going to see through his charade, it would be her. Groaning, Davis dragged himself out of bed and began his now familiar routine of transformation. As he applied makeup and adjusted his wig, he couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the day everything fell apart. Downstairs, his mother was bustling about, humming cheerfully as she gathered her purse and keys. "There you are, sweetheart," she said as Monroe appeared at the foot of the stairs. "We don't want to be late. You know how Evelyn gets about punctuality." The drive to the restaurant was filled with his mother's chatter about family gossip and plans for the upcoming holidays. Monroe nodded and made appropriate noises of interest, all while his stomach churned with anxiety. Aunt Evelyn was already seated when they arrived, her keen eyes taking in every detail as they approached the table. "Well, well," she said, her voice dry as she looked Monroe up and down. "If it isn't my favorite niece." "It's good to see you, Aunt Evelyn." As they settled into their seats and ordered, Evelyn's gaze remained fixed on Monroe. There was something in her eyes, a mix of curiosity and suspicion that made Monroe's skin crawl. "So, Monroe," Evelyn said, stirring her coffee, "tell me about work. Your mother says you're doing well, but I'd love to hear it from you." Monroe launched into the carefully crafted story he had prepared for such questions, speaking about projects and colleagues that didn't exist. But with each word, he could see the doubt growing in Evelyn's eyes. "Interesting," she said when he finished. "You know, it's funny. I ran into an old friend of yours the other day." "What was her name? Jenny? Jessica?" "Julie," Monroe's mother supplied helpfully. "Right, Julie," Evelyn nodded. "Anyway, she mentioned seeing you at a coffee shop downtown. Said you looked different. Shorter hair, men's clothes. Isn't that odd?" Monroe felt his heart skip a beat. He forced a laugh, trying to keep his voice steady. "Oh, that's funny. She must have mistaken someone else for me. I haven't changed my look in years." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. Must have been a mistake then." The rest of the brunch passed in a haze of tension for Monroe. Every question felt like a trap, every glance from Evelyn loaded with unspoken suspicion. By the time they said their goodbyes, Monroe was exhausted from the effort of maintaining his facade. As they drove home, his mother chattered happily about how nice it was to catch up with Evelyn. Monroe made non-committal noises of agreement, his mind racing with the close call they'd just had. Back at the house, Monroe excused himself to his room, claiming a headache. Once alone, he carefully removed the wig and makeup, becoming Davis once more. He sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, overwhelmed by the events of the day. The sound of his phone buzzing drew his attention. It was a message from Michael. "Dude, where have you been? We're worried about you. Come out with us tonight." Davis stared at the message, longing for the simplicity of a night out with friends who knew him as he truly was. But the thought of his mother downstairs, content in her belief that her daughter was just in the next room, held him back. He typed out a quick reply. "Can't tonight. Maybe next time." As he hit send, Davis felt a wave of despair wash over him. How long could he keep living this double life? How many more close calls could he endure before someone finally saw through the illusion? The weight of his secret pressed down on him, threatening to crush him beneath its burden. In that moment, Davis made a decision. He couldn't continue like this, not for his mother's sake and not for his own. With trembling hands, he opened his laptop and began to type. It was time to tell the truth, to explain everything to his mother in a way that she might understand. He poured his heart out onto the screen, explaining who he really was, why he had maintained the charade for so long, and how much he loved her despite it all. As he wrote, tears blurred his vision, but he pressed on. This was his chance for freedom, for honesty, for a life that was truly his own. When he finally finished, he sat back, exhausted, but somehow lighter. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would give his mother the letter and face whatever consequences came. For now, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he could be Davis all the time. No more wigs, no more dresses, no more lies. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.